But in Luke, the 18th chapter, verse 27, when he was asked who could be saved, but he said, the things which are impossible with men are possible with God. Sometimes we have to look to God for the impossible. Here's one young man who did that in trusting God with his intelligence. George Danzig, as a senior at Stanford University during the Depression, all seniors knew that they joined the unemployment line when the class graduated. There was a slim chance that the top person in class might get a teaching job. George was not at the head of his class, but he hoped that if he were able to achieve a perfect score on the final exam, he might be given a job. He studied so hard for the exam that he arrived late to class. When he got to class, the others were already hard at work. He was embarrassed and just picked up his paper and slunk into his desk. He sat down and worked the 8 problems on the test paper. Then he started on the 2 written on the board. Try as he might, he couldn't solve either of them. He was devastated. Out of the 10 problems, he had missed 2 for sure. But just as he was about to hand in his paper, he took a chance and asked the professor if he could have a couple of days to work on the 2 he had missed. He was surprised when the professor agreed. George rushed home and plunged into those equations with vengeance. He spent hours and hours, but he could find the solution for only one of them. He never could solve the other. It was impossible. Then he turned in the test, and he knew he had lost all chance of a job. That was the darkest moment of his life. The next morning, a pounding on the door awakened George. It was his mathematics professor, very excited. George, George, he kept shouting, you made mathematics history. George didn't know what the professor was talking about. The professor explained. Before the exam, he had encouraged the class to keep trying in spite of setback and failure. Don't be discouraged, he had counseled. Remember, there are classic problems that no one can solve. Even Einstein was unable to lock their secrets. He then wrote 2 of those problems on the blackboard. George had come to class late and missed those opening remarks. He didn't know the problem on the board were impossible to solve. He thought that they were part of his exam and was determined that he could work them. He had solved one. He did the impossible. That very morning, the professor made George Danzig his assistant. He taught at Stanford until his retirement. Nothing's impossible with God. Without him, all things are impossible, but nothing is impossible with him. Just remember that as you go along the day. Trust in the Lord, for what all things even seem impossible. God bless you. Have a good weekend. Be at church someplace Sunday morning.